And here we are for another week. And this week, Ammonize is taking a look at the business of my friend Christopher Vogelmann. And it's an interesting business. I mean, it's no secret to anybody that I'm a big fan of engagement and making things work. And that's exactly where Christopher's business lives. So it's something that I absolutely adore as a product, and I'm really hoping to be able to do good things for him this week. So, Christopher, introduce yourself, say hello.
Thank you so much, Am, and I'm very, very pleased to be here. I'm Dr. Christopher Vogelmann, otherwise known as Dr.V. I'm the president and CEO of Epic Systems, which is a software as a service platform for engagement, loyalty, and increased revenue.
Excellent. Lee, say hello.
Hello, I'm Lee Wriggler. My company's Point and Stare. It's an online production agency doing loads of work in WordPress.
Excellent. And unfortunately, Amy couldn't join us tonight. Family issues have sort of overrun, and she won't be coming, which, believe me, has put a slight damper on it all for all of us, but we shall persist, no doubt, and we've got a lot to do. So without further ado, let's kick off. And for a change, what I'm going to do is quickly pick up where we left off with site design in a previous hangout.
Oh.
Because what's changed is, well, mostly, what's the phrase, Lee? Naffle. That's the one.
Yeah, nothing. Nothing, I think it was.
So, epic win. We still love the logo. We always did love the logo. We still don't like this image. And really, not a lot has changed.
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say other than the designer has sent me an email 2 weeks ago saying he just hired somebody new and I can look forward to something shortly. So I'm just getting it next. I need to clarify the definition of shortly.
He hired a midget. I think that's probably what it means. You've got now 2 little midgets running around your site. One thing I did like, of course, and would point out to everybody is that even while the rest of it isn't going, we do have you owe it to yourself to get a free consultation. Click here. So there is the minimum viable product already up there, i.e. get consultation in. And it is an important thing while you're still waiting for other things to be built. If consultation is one of your business products, you can be doing that on day one, so make sure that's up on the site.
And in fact, I actually had a conversation with my one of my team members who's going to be an implementation. He is an implementation expert currently in another company, and we were looking at the consultancy model as a way to work while we gather all our developers and build out the platform in agile development. Yeah,
absolutely, and that's certainly one of the things to do. Of course, there's one thing that I can pick on you for, and that is, of course, the blog. You know, the last post is in June. We're now in October almost. You know, you've really got to keep this up. You need to be putting at least 1 post a week up, even while the rest of the site is making you cry every time you go on it. You know, write it in Word first and then just go in and paste. You know.
I'm almost thinking though I'm actually better off and doing a series of short videos, like in the 2 to 3 minute maximum.
I loved the traffic light one today, obviously.
Yeah, but that one didn't make it.
Why is that on G Plus and not on your blog?
It's a very good question because I mean I will tell you that I've kind of lost control of the whole website, and regaining control is one of the things that I really need to do, even if it means finding a different developer at some point.
Okay.
One thing you can do in the meantime is get rid of the date on there, because then it won't look so old. So it is a bit of a cheat, but in the meantime you could probably do that.
Well, I've also been told, like Martin Shervington says, that cat pictures are very good, so maybe we can use Snowshoe.
Yeah.
Okay. A couple of things I'm going to pull out straight away in the code before I hand it over to Lee.
Okay.
First thing is the meta description. So this is the description that you're asking the search engines to show. And it says, in any service encounter, perception is reality. What really matters is how the customer interprets the encounter. Create an epic win for your business. It's fine on a page, but when I'm on a page of search results, that doesn't tell me enough about the site to click through at all. So obviously that is a bad description in terms of getting people through. This is one of the areas where you do want the keywords, not particularly for how it ranks, but for how, if you're using the same words that your customers are, you've created resonance. So if you know what kind of searches people are most likely to be searching for and you use the same language, you're more likely to get that click.
Well, people, for the most part, they're never going to search for the word gamification. In fact, most CEOs and CMOs I've spoken to, they just sort of glaze over in terms of their eyes. And they really respond, though, to engagement. If you say we're going to increase engagement, they automatically latch onto it.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's going to be, but that's going to be interior more. This is your homepage statement, so this is what your company's about, but still, if somebody is looking for gamification company, those 2 customers per year, they should be finding your site. If they're looking for, engagement companies, bring it on.
Or loyalty.
Don't end up getting wedding bookings, but...
Yeah, well, no, like loyalty programs too. Yeah, that is one of the challenges. Whenever you have something with engagement, you'll find this whole list of everything to do with, the ring, the party, finding your bridesmaids. So there's the challenge with that keyword.
Yeah, absolutely. So next thing, the image for your logo is just the word logo. That's going to tell me a lot. If I was to find, that in a image search, logo. Oh, well, you must be the only site with a logo. That's going to do you a lot of good, isn't it? So it should, at the very least, say Epic Win Systems logo.
Right, and I agree with that. In fact, my own picture, the image that I use across most of the internet, has my name in there instead of, JPEG number 539 or whatever it is.
And the really big one is that we still have this div class SEO title, div class SEO description, div class SEO keywords embedded in the page. These are from the Yoast plugin. They're supposed to be up in the header, setting the document parameters. For some reason, they've been turned into divs and put on the page in invisible text. That's a thing that can get you a ban. So at the moment, this is begging Google to ban it completely from the search results.
That would ruin my day.
Yeah, it would ruin your months because that's how long it would take to get this back. So if your developer happens to watch this show, fix this today, not tomorrow. Today. This is a really bad risk. You could be up for a liability. So this kind of thing does need to be fixed straight away. Make sure when something fails, it fails safe. This is not failing.
If he's not watching, I'll send him the link for the replay.
Oh. Lee.
All that negativity, well, the good part of it is I checked for malware, for blacklisting, for injected spam, defacement, stuff like that. Absolutely nothing. So your hosting isn't too bad. The theme you're using, it's a nice little theme. Sorry, I'm being posh now. Theme. If you go to your website and then you go to the theme website, you've got the same favicon, which is a little icon then up by the address bar. Obviously, little things like that need changing as well. But essentially, it's a nice little theme. Just needs to work on a little bit more. I think. You're using layer slider, and I heard through the grapevine that there was a security issue with it a couple of weeks ago. Now, whether that's right or not, I could do a bit more digging around. If that is, I'm also pretty sure that they've upgraded it and they've updated it, so it just needs updated on your site. Your site itself is using 3.9.2, I think it was, which again is not a problem. But WordPress is version 4 now, so again there are security issues there that might need to be tightened up a little bit. Other than that, yes, there's a few little content issues that I could go through, but I'm trying to be positive.
So we do know that the site is due to be fixed, or the developer's due to be put against the wall and shot, whichever. So we won't go too far into the site things, but those are the kind of things that I will mention for the sake of the audience, so they know what kind of things to keep an eye out for themselves.
Yep.
And they obviously are things to be fixed. The strategy with your website is always going to be to write lots of interesting articles, because a lot of people don't know this area. And actually, I think on that grounds, gamification is a good keyword for you to get lots of eyeballs and lots of views and lots of people talking about it and lots of people learning what it is, because it's still a thing that you can say, pick 100 people at random on the street, ask them what gamification is. At least 50% of them aren't going to know. That's the kind of going to Google, and they're going to Google every day. So, a few articles explaining what gamification is, particularly in specific terms where the people might have heard of it. Okay, so it's something to do with games, right? But how does gamification apply to postal services? So if you've got an article that is about some sort of gamification that's been applied to postal services, suddenly there you are, top ranking, absolutely giving the answer. That's the kind of thing, oh, that's interesting, they pass it on.
It's interesting that you mentioned something like public service, like the Postal Service, because in yesterday's mail was some amazing news. We have a local toll road, and I kid you not, the toll road, it's the most expensive toll road per mile in the United States, and people aren't using it. So they're offering them free travel between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., but more than that, they're having contests for people so they can enter by using the toll road. And I just found this in yesterday's mail.
Yep. And of course, the Postal Service is one of the original gamification things, because stamps are collector's items.
Oh, absolutely.
Stamps are badges.
Yeah.
Stamps are those things that everyone wants to earn and get. And you'll get stamps. You may have stamps that are going to last you till next year, well and truly to the end of it. But if a Christmas stamp comes out, you're going to go and get the Christmas stamps. So it certainly is something that gamification applies to a lot. Look at all the people that collect postcards and things from all over the world as well, so they've got the postage stamps on. So yeah, funny enough, it is one of those things where gamification absolutely comes in. I've seen travel companies, transportation companies use the same sort of thing as well. So it is actually an area where it comes in. It's far more the office type environment where we don't think of it so much. And that's a shame,
HR,
because
HR is a huge space for gamification, actually, motivating employees and getting instantaneous feedback. Someone doesn't have to wait for their quarterly or annual review. They know at the end of every day or the beginning of the next day how their performance is compared to what it used to be or what their metrics are.
Yeah, the leaderboards. I do sometimes think that those, I've got a problem with KPIs a lot of the time. Most of the time, KPIs are just because they have to be simplified, or you've got 80 KPIs that nobody can keep track of.
You're talking key performance indices as opposed to key performance kitties?
Yes.
Okay.
So
off he goes.
The problem with KPIs is that usually it's doing the things that SEOs used to do. Oh, Google looks at links, so I'll get as many fake links as possible and ram them at my site. Well, it stands out like a sore thumb. And I think a lot of KPIs are exactly the same. When Google was simpler, you could gain the KPIs and gain the positions. These days, there are so many different KPIs, they're using them in just the right sort of balance that they've pretty much got enough complexity to get it right most of the time. That, of course.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood because I was thinking KPIs relative to the HR space, to human resources.
Well, in anything, I think a lot of the time, the minute you start rewarding something that's supposed to lead to success, people start doing that as much as they can out of context.
True. We see that in the U.S. with the No Child Left Behind law, and teachers are teaching to the tests rather than to a body of knowledge.
Yes. And another great example is kind of, you've got salesmen, and you work out that your salesmen, on average convert 1 in 10 calls. and that your best salesmen are doing 100 calls a day. So you make the number of calls made a KPI. So immediately the salesmen stop worrying about the quality of the calls they're making and just need to make as many as possible, because that's what the KPI is about. You haven't done it just, they've got the commission on the bottom line anyway, but they can get more points by just making as many calls as possible, even if there's no chance of success, which means they start wasting their time, and if anything, productivity goes down. That's the kind of example of how KPIs can always go completely out of focus. We're people, we cheat. Every time there's a game, there's a cheat.
Well, and when you're designing games too, you actually design, even in a gamification program, you design for the fact that people are going to game the system that you've created, and that can sometimes actually result in even greater engagement. And the best example I can give you there is McDonald's has their famous Monopoly game that they release, I think, every fall, maybe it's November or so, and it increases same-store sales by 15%. And it's a game. It's not a video game. It's a scratch-off card game. But it's against the user terms of service to trade the objects of the various houses that fit onto the Monopoly board card. Yet people do it all the time, and McDonald's condones it because it creates a buzz. It creates engagement, excitement. It creates that sort of viral pandemic that we've spoken about before.
Absolutely. And these are all tools in the box. And of course, gamification itself is only one of the tools in the engagement box.
Exactly. And people think of it as the be-all and end-all, but gamification is not going to fix a bad business.
Exactly. So when you're kind of pitching the idea, what are the sticking points, other than the bad side of the gamification words kind of hijacking their brain completely?
There really aren't bad sides necessarily. I think the emphasis, when you make the emphasis upon attracting a greater number of customers, getting them to stay longer, in other words, the loyalty play, and getting them to buy more of your goods and services, it's a very clear play for people. It's getting beyond the lexicon, because just as soon as somebody hears the word game, they're thinking video games nowadays. Nobody thinks of checkers or chess or poker or other things like that. They think very high-tech, very complicated. But the simplest form of gamification I've seen in a long, long time is simply the leaderboard in the back office of a brokerage firm where my family does business. They have it's a whiteboard with people's names in rank order according to how much business they're bringing in a particular month.
Yeah.
So it can be as complex or as simple as you want it to be.
People do forget the ways that gamification can be used for customers beyond the obvious. So, if you had a sandwich shop, keeping a list up, the names of the customers who've ordered the most outrageous sandwiches that week, people will start ordering more and more outrageous sandwiches, which means they're going to be ordering more and more fillings, more and more toppings. Your profit per customer is going to soar as people start playing to get on that board.
Right.
And that's simple things.
A classic example of that is Buffalo Wild Wings, who did something similar to that several years ago. They had customers create their own challenges, and they would be rewarded with sending out a tweet with a picture showing the sauciest wing or the spiciest wings or this or that, or how many gallons of beer they'd consumed. But ultimately, it just did amazing things for their bottom line, and because in order to play the game and achieve status within Buffalo Wild Wings, you had to consume product.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, a lot of services have come along that are essentially built on gamification principles. Foursquare, I would say, as a platform, is entirely based on that. The idea of you can become mayor of a place because you check in there more often than anybody else.
Yeah, and I lost all my mayorships, and I was really pissed off when I left Foursquare. So.
Oh, it's hotly contested in some coffee shops, especially the ones with Wi-Fi. Which is a strange thing if you think about it. At our Father's Day, that would have got you sacked. That you've been in that coffee shop so much time that you're now the mayor of it.
Well, I would think it would have been the pub as opposed to the coffee shop.
It might be. Anyway. enough about the Brighton seafront and all its Wi-Fi pubs. So the thing is, who are your ideal customers? I mean, I'm assuming that the perfect ones tend to be the larger corporations, because engagement for them with such a big organization is absolutely key, internally as well as externally.
Right. I think, I originally targeted Fortune 5,000 companies, but the reality is it's probably Fortune 10,000 companies, and then also any startups that happen to have a pile of cash and want to get to traction as quickly as possible and the fastest return on the investment back to the investors who've come to their aid.
Yeah, yeah.
Somebody who really wants to rise to the top very quickly with innovation.
Yes, and I imagine as well that they are quite different customers for your different services. I think, gamification and engagement things towards the customer are something that the smaller and medium-sized business is much more easily able to grasp and want, whereas internal team building, staff morale boosting, that's going to tend to be very much the enterprise level and up.
And there are people who specialize in that within the gamification marketplace. I choose not to be in that realm. I think customer acquisition, maintaining a healthy customer base, and increasing consumption are the things that I'm looking forward to. And eventually I will have, I'm not going to call it a dumbed down version, but a less expensive subscription-based version that will allow smaller businesses, some of the mom and pop shops, to participate.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the core parts of marketing your business is absolutely going to be content marketing, and it is going to be a real variety. You are going to need to have articles that help explain things, because these are still new to a lot of people. You're going to have articles that show people inspirational and aspirational examples of how this has been used successfully by various companies, with a bit of sort of in-depth analysis of why it worked, how it worked, what the figures are. So certainly that's the kind of content you should be writing a blog post about every single week. Every week you should find some example that you can bring up, really go into, and put up there. Because that's the kind of thing that's going to make people sign up for your mailing list. To get that thing coming through to their inbox every single week. And if you've got, a couple of fun things in other parts of the week, I think that's going to be great.
Something.
Got just a comment from Manny. Tend to a behaviour, and people gravitate towards it and create a narrative around it. Essentially, you create the content, and when people like it, they'll evangelise about it, dumbing it down there for people like me to understand.
Tell me a story.
But this is exactly it, and people want to hear the stories of how this works. So it's great to put up facts and figures, and that's going to convert certain types of people, but other people need that success story. They need the narrative. This company was in this position, and then they tried this and implemented this, and it did this. And
that's why we're looking for the testimonials. So as we roll out in beta and build module after module, we will have those success stories, and until that time we piggyback by pretty much doing curated content from other sources.
Yeah, absolutely. But remember, this is the time when you should be building that list so that you can do the successful launch. So getting those blog posts about what other people are doing, getting people interested in the field now is absolutely essential to making an efficient launch, rather than launching and then trying to chase up a market for it. Certainly, we know you've got video covered. You enjoy your video. You probably need to do it just a tad more regularly, even if it's just absolutely every month. At the end of the month, it'll be done. Again, people have patterns, and it's easier if you can fit in with their routines in some way, shape, or form.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I've actually hired someone who's helping me create a gamification course, and this individual has done this in the past. And he suggested something remarkably similar, which was, although he's an academic, he plays very nicely in the corporate world. He's consulted to a lot of Fortune 500 companies. It's kind of like hiring a divorce lawyer, because I mean, they're not cheap, but you do get what you pay for in this situation. And he mentioned something similar, which is creating these little 2-minute video snippets that we would drip out over time that will be very content rich and that will be easily shared and easily viewed because they're in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, I would strongly think about introducing a community as well and gamifying it, so that basically you're creating user-generated content to share your stories of gamification or your ways and thoughts about it. So, you know, essentially a forum, but reward people, have voting systems that are based, how relevant was this, how well written, several criteria that it can get 1 to 5 stars in, and there's a leaderboard, and that will help people realize the kind of content you want and encourage more of it, but also absolutely demonstrate exactly what you're talking about in hard terms for the facts and figures guys.
Yeah, and I think there are ways of doing that. I mean, there's some relatively inexpensive plugins that are, say, less than $1,000 or so that you could put in, or they're available on a subscription basis for maybe. I mean, they don't do a lot, but they basically give you points, badges, leaderboards, and reward people for sharing content. And it does give people status. It's just
several of the free software for running forums already have those kind of features built in.
Right.
So it's not impossible to do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it takes a little bit of tweaking. You might want to get a PHP guy in, but literally in a day, often they can add in all of it or modify it. Because often it's only designed to reward people in 5 stars in one measurement, not in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5.
But yeah, that's why I'm thinking of these particular plugins. I mean, some are subscription basis, and you can find vendors who will create those. And then they might charge you $500, and you might sell it to a client for $1,200 or $1,500 a month, which is still in the realm of many small businesses. They can afford something like that, providing you have some consulting to go along with it, that you're not just giving them a PBL solution.
Yeah, you've also got to think of how to demonstrate where consulting actually pays off. Because again, it's an intangible product and it's quite new, and a lot of the people that are right in your market right now are the people that are still kind of resistant. Let's face it, there's more brilliant sounding ideas out there that don't work than good ones at times, and your budget is fixed and your options are limitless. So it's not a case of just proving that what you've got is good, it's proving that it's got the ROI, or that it's got the low barrier to success to really be worth doing.
Well, I think we're working with an API, a REST API, we have the low barrier to implementation, but the likelihood for most businesses is anywhere from a 10 to 15% increase in revenue. And it may not sound like a lot, but if each one of your customers is buying an additional 10% of product or service, that's pretty significant at the end of the year.
Now, let me pull this one in because it's a very good point. Could you list your top 3 or 4 specific services? So he's wondering, are your services sort of one-stop shopping or intending to be coordinated? I think what we'll do here is say the intended services rather than the ones that are already there.
Right. I mean, the intention is a global solution, so it is the one-stop shop. A la carte tends not to work very well, which is why in the example of Foursquare, they were based primarily on badges and points. And if you're just using points and badges, that has anywhere from maybe 3 to 4 months lifespan, and then interest just drops off precipitously. So and as part of a whole package, you do what any doctor would do, which is the patient comes to you, the sick business, if you will, ask a lot of questions, do some of your examination procedures, kind of probe their current metrics, come up with a diagnosis. Here's what's wrong. You're not doing this, this, and this. Prescribe a treatment plan, or in this case, a plan of action, then implement, and then follow the progress, follow the adherence to that treatment plan or those recommendations over the course of I would say more like 18 months, but typically, in 6-month intervals.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, hopefully that's cleared that up. Before I move on from the community, the user-generated stuff, I'd say have a look at UMoz, which is moz.com's version, moz.com, their version where SEOs can share their own tips, their own articles. It produces a lot of content, and it produces some good content. Obviously, not everything it produces is great, but it has produced an awful lot of good content over time. So that is certainly a good example to be looking at and thinking on, even if not exactly copying, but good example to look at.
I just got a subscription to them the other day for their trial subscription, so I can learn a little bit about SEO. So I know what both of you are talking about.
The tools will be quite handy to you at this stage. Certainly look at their keyword difficulty tools and things like that, because it will help you map out some of the content you can write about, to look for some of the low-hanging fruit, some of the easy wins.
Speaking of easy wins, is there any advantage? I mean, I have a few of these domain names that are the so-called, they're not necessarily long-tail keyword, but they're rich, like gamification, domination, gamification guide, things like that. Is there any advantage to developing those or making them subdomains or creating siloed sites? Or
it kind of depends. I think at the moment your time is one of your biggest bottlenecks. You've got so much to do. You've still got to do an awful lot of liaising with getting the software built, which is going to take more and more of your time as that.
Yeah, in fact, I would say that vetting people takes up easily 60 to 70% of my time right now.
Yeah, and once they're running, they're going to want to continually check: is this right? Is that right? Unless you've got somebody with a really crystal clear idea that can basically run it as your architect, you are going to have to spend a lot of time.
Yeah, I have a very good strategist and someone who can do the basic architecture, but then we need to farm that out to a development team, and I've got my eye on 3 different dev teams right now. Looking particular to outsourcing overseas, either Eastern Europe, Middle East, a few other places, only because their PhD candidates coming out can work as interns, for example, have internships, and that greatly reduces the cost of development from hiring somebody at $180,000 a year to $24,000 to $30,000 a year.
Yeah, I have a mixed reputation for my opinions on outsourcing to India. I think if you know exactly what you want to get done and aren't relying on them to understand vague concepts, it's excellent value. There's a reason that Google has big data centers over there. Those guys know what their level of professionalism, their level of delivery is usually quite high. Unfortunately, their level of original creative thinking is quite low. Unfortunately, the system over there seems to drive creativity out. The way that education is done there, it seems to be almost as rigid as the caste system. There's this. This is the way it's done, this is the only way it's done, and it literally crushes creativity out of people.
Well, there are also opportunities here within the United States. The best example I can give you is I have one of my friends who's a branding expert has development people in central Pennsylvania and upstate New York, where the cost of living is dramatically lower than it is, say, in DC or Los Angeles or New York. And as a result, you can pick up someone for, you might pay 150 to 180 in the U.S. They might be satisfied with 50 to 60K. But they're still within your own time zone. They're very creative. They're very happy that you help them pay their minimal mortgage or rental because they're in areas that are economically depressed, but they still have that creative instinct. They have the intelligence. They have a very hard work ethic, and they have a high-speed connection.
Things like this, one of the greatest workforces possible is the mothers on maternity leave. You've got some of the top professionals in the world who are taking 6 to 12 months out of their career, and if you don't mind that their hours need to be flexible, you have people you couldn't possibly afford working for almost nothing because it's all extra money. This is just for treats. And that can be an incredibly valuable market. And it helps them too, because that way when they're going back to work, they don't have a blank space for a year or two when they want to return, or if they decide to be stay-at-home mums for a few years. There's not a blank space. There's still work in there, and therefore when they want to go back to the workplace, it's not an easy excuse for people. Oh, well, yeah, but you haven't done anything in 3 years. You're obviously going to be rusty. So it's a win-win there.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because Kellen Flukiger, who you and I both know, he was talking to me about an organization. I think it's a nonprofit within the Church of Latter-day Saints, within the Mormons, that has stay-at-home moms who are retired corporate executives and others who do this type of work, but more along the lines of admin, project management, these types of things. But the idea of getting software developers, female software developers who are taking maternity leave, is quite intriguing.
Yeah, yeah. And it runs across the gamut. So for the audience watching, whatever their business, the chances are there are some top people in their field that they couldn't normally dream of approaching, who would actually love to hear from them now that they're taking maternity leave. So it's one of those things.
Thank God for babies.
So the next part is that AdWords is going to be part of your strategy. No two ways about it. Because those corporate clients are there, they are going to be doing lots of searches for businesses. And when they need a solution, it's usually that sort of mid-level executive below the C-level who has been tasked with, right, we're going to do this, find us some companies. And they're doing the quite obvious searches, and they're specifically looking for vendors. To look in. Pay-per-click works very well there. These are people that they're quite happy with pay-per-click to pay for it because they're looking for commercial services. They're not filtering them out of the results. They probably use advertising themselves, so they understand that if you've got your ad strategy right, you'll probably live a little bit smarter, a bit more professional. So that gets the traffic. Remember that once they're there, again, we already know these are probably going to be mid-level executives. So they're probably going to have to make a pitch to somebody else. So one of the materials that should always be on your site is things that they can make a pitch for you with.
Right, and I've outsourced actually the creation of a white paper. So that's going to be very interesting once we have that thing.
White paper is very good. Don't forget PowerPoints.
Right. I know, but I would think a smaller number. I don't want to overload anybody with death by PowerPoint. So I'm looking at the range of maybe 6 or 7 slides.
Yeah, it's just that C-level executives are often the very worst for TLDR. Too long, didn't read. Your white paper, great. Brochure, more safe. Something that's got bullet points where they can just read the executive summary at the top. Yeah, that's more like the level. Sometimes a white paper can work as long as it has that executive summary and some good stats.
And I think the white paper will have bullet points in it, in and of itself. So you'll be able to just look and say, oh, wow, there's 3 points there. They'll zero in on that part of the paper as opposed to reading the paragraph above or below.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got, that as one part, appealing to the business that's ready to buy, or at least, knows that this is something they've been told to go and shop for, and therefore I'm educated about. You need to also get that general groundswell. You need that idea of lots of people talking about you, thinking about you, being the proof of the pudding that you've got engagement. So that's where that community comes in, because always not only point out their own content, but make sure that they link to it on the forums they're connected with, their own blogs, their own sites. They boost their content. They want people to see, oh, look how clever I am, I've written this. It's there. It's just a fact. They will pass it on to their family and friends. But you're also going to want just some of that fun stuff that really has the chance to go viral itself, but certainly has the chance of lots of people sharing it and just having a day. Have you thought of a strategy along those lines of which way you'd be kind of leaning.
I actually had a business advisor suggest that I not create a community, for example, because of the time suck relative to managing that community. I mean, granted, you could probably hire or bring on people to moderate a community, but going into other communities and sharing things is probably a good idea. The whole program, Epic Influencers, was originally designed to create a bit of buzz, and then after bringing a certain number of people on who were influential, we're actually retooling the show to have it focused more about influencing human behavior. So that's the natural evolution of that show, was to make it an extension of Epic Win, which is why the logo is actually literally an extension of the Epic Win logo. It was very deliberate, yeah.
Because that's always been one of the things that absolutely fascinates me. One of the words I bring up with clients quite a lot that makes them scratch their head is captology. Actually comes from education. The education field, online education, captology is how you change behavior through education.
Oh, very interesting. So C-A-P-T, captology?
It's important enough that it's on my business cards.
We're not talking about catology.
I was a cat. Yeah, I'm holding Snowshoe down so he doesn't take over the camera. So.
So the reason that this is on there is partly because it's one of those words that people don't know, and because they don't know, what's that? And I've always told.
We're intrigued.
If you can educate somebody, it's the greatest form of branding you can ever do. You tell them something. Some interesting, fascinating fact, they are going to pass it on to 2 or 3 other people that day, and every time they do, they're going to think of you. And over the coming weeks and months, they'll pass it on, and every time they do, they'll think of you.
It's so funny you say that, because years ago, I used to teach classes to chiropractors and their staff all across the U.S. and Canada, and one of my co-conspirators, Dr. Romero out of Oklahoma, came along, and he kept talking about neuroinduction. And I actually, at one point, neuroinduction, I found it was in Dorland's dictionary, and it simply means suggestion. And so years ago, I just decided I might as well register the domain name, and nobody had it. So neuroinduction just sounds fascinating. It's a real word, and I've got the .com, so it reminds me of the captology that you're talking about.
Excellent. Now that's a domain I'd say to use and work on.
Yeah.
But it's going to be one of those things that, you know, time is your most precious resource.
I should have Dr. Manny St. Victor work on that one.
Well, yeah, he's good guy.
Neuroinduction. If you're out there, Manny, we're talking about you.
Yeah. So
in the meantime, I was just about to say on the domains, there's no reason why you can't forward them to your main domain in the meantime, rather than building, spending time building little sites on them. Yeah,
I wouldn't, because you don't want to create duplicate content, so you don't want those domains coming up with your homepage. If there's 50 domains and every single one of them delivers a page which is effectively the same text because it's redirecting to your site, that's bad. So you'd have to 301 redirect. And there's no point, because there's no strength in that domain unless you spend time building links to it, which is going to be harder when you've got no content to be attracting its own links. And you could have spent that time building up your own domain in the first place. That link becomes a weak link. So, yeah, I wouldn't personally do that. I think keep hold of them because some of them have value. Look at the ones you're not going to use that you might want to sell. Think of the ones that you might have that are not as valuable as they could be if you spent some time on it, put them on a back burner. Those are the ones you wouldn't sell just yet, but at some time you might try and increase a bit of value and then sell them, build up some traffic to them. But others, neuroinduction, that's a great one.
That's just neuroinduction. I just think that's the cat's meow, if you pardon the expression.
Yeah. We've got a slightly different one that begins with dogs. But anyway, the main thing is that, that's a great domain. If you had the time, gosh, yes, work on it. But,
well, I have the good fortune of having located someone who's worked in the software industry and has written content for software companies. And she's up near New York City, and I've contracted with her to create 10 blog posts. So she knows me well enough now to be able to speak in my voice, and I still have the capability of editing those. So it's a way of leveraging my time, because as you mentioned earlier, time is the thing that I have the least of at this point.
Yes, and that's unfortunately only going to get worse.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that brings me up to a really important point that separates you from a lot of the people that have been on this show so far, and some of the ones that are coming, in that this is a market with a high barrier to entry. And you've had to put quite a lot of time and effort and money into this already to get as far as you've got, with a long way still to go, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at 6 figures into it so far, and I'll be raising probably between 1.2 to 1.5 million in an SEC offering within the next 10 months or so. This is not a Kickstarter program. I mean, although you could do something, on Kickstarter and make raise $1 million or so, but I have a lot of legal hoops to jump through with respect to the Securities and Exchange Commission, a lot of legal fees. I mean, it's $10,000 to $12,000 just to get the paperwork together to be able to pitch both angels and venture capitalists.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a cheap game at all, and software development is one of the most expensive of all things. It really is.
Which is why we've kind of looked towards doing some outsourcing, some offshore outsourcing, I should say, as well as doing some within the U.S., but I'm not going to go to Silicon Valley where everyone has been gobbled up by Google.
But of course that then means you've got to have good project managers, and project managers, although they can save you an absolute fortune in the long run, they're not cheap in the short run. So it's definitely one of the things that, this is a big barrier to entry, and that is the difference. You are what I call an entrepreneur, because you are having to take considerable risks and put a lot of capital. When we say bootstrapping, you're doing this on your own finances so far, but this is not small amounts. No,
and I can tell you, I have wasted so much capital within the last 18 months. I mean, if I could get 120 or 130K back from those things that didn't work out, I would love that right now, because it would take me out of the realm of bootstrapping. But I can't say that those were all wasted, because they're very, very valuable lessons that I learned along the way, and I've met some amazing people who continue to open doors for me in corporate America, in the entertainment industry, in the gaming industry in and of itself. So you do in some ways have to pay to play if you're going to be working towards what I hope to have, which is either we go IPO or we become an acquisition target within 5 years. Yeah. So, and then you're looking at a company that hopefully will be valued at, I would hope at a minimum, maybe $250 million, which is an outlandish claim to make. But when you understand, when you do the research and see the financials and see what companies pay for these types of services on a simple software as service platform in the cloud, you begin to recognize that what I used to think of as big money when I had my chiropractic practice, it's the same amount of effort, but you just add 2 or 3 zeros to everything.
Yeah, pretty much. Because one of the big things that pays off in business isn't effort, it's risk. There is a large amount of gambling involved in all kinds of business. You are gambling that just because customers have traditionally bought this, that they're going to continue to buy it.
Right.
You're gambling that nobody's got some completely revolutionary new product about to come out next week. You can't know. There's no way you can know. So all business is gambling, and whoever is taking the biggest gamble takes the biggest cut off the payout. And this is why the bosses tend to get the big bucks, is because ultimately it's their name on the thing, it's their reputation on the line. They are the one taking all the risks.
It's your neck. It's your neck in the guillotine.
Yes. So that's something again that I want people to understand when looking at business generally. Is the level of risk is where the level of that's why investment is paying off the way it is. Because even for venture capitalists, even with all of their years of experience, with all of the things they can do, I mean, the traditional figure, which not a lot of people realise, is that most small businesses, 95% will fail. 95% of all new ventures will fail. That's the broad figure. With all of the skills, experience, taking their time, everything they know, venture capitalists can get that down to about 80%. But they can't beat the odds, they can just influence it that much.
Well, and it's remarkably similar to mutual funds. I mean, most people don't realize that a mutual fund, when they see the return on the investment, say over 3 years or 5 years or what have you, there probably have been 10 mutual funds created in a little mutual fund farm in the back office. And the one or two that have succeeded are the ones that the company brings out into the light of day. And it is the same thing in the VC world. You may have one winner out of 10, and 8 or 9 of them are going to be dogs. But you play the odds. And I mean, I'm a reformed day trader in the stock market. So I mean, I am used to risk. This is to me, this is riskier than day trading. But I see the potential. The lessons I've learned thus far are amazing. And more than anything else, the people with whom I've connected have made this whole 18-month adventure worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you have met some great contacts. Those are resources at your disposal. The people that you've got in your network now, and we all know, really important, the ability to use your network. Once upon a time, that was only the old school network, you know.
The good old boys.
The internet has meant that you can connect with people that you didn't go to university with, and you can connect even more closely and be able to use those. Just pull this up because Bill has given the full thing behind captology. This is what it stands for: computers as persuasive technology.
Ah, interesting.
As I say, it's actually come from the education field.
Yeah, and I think of gamification as simply rapport amplified by technology.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the big opportunities for you generally is that companies are realizing more and more that technology is hurting us. Now, The Guardian recently had a big article on Google's conference in Ireland where they pull in the Buddhists and the Trappist monks and have gongs and, you know, a big spiritual kind of awakening thing because computers and technology is so high pressure and dehumanizing. The fact that we are now, you know, constantly, we've got our little phone there and we're all ready, and constantly we're listening out for pings and we're seeing who's mentioned us, and the stress levels of that and the unnatural focus of that, the fact that, you know, you're not seeing somebody face to face, you're not getting those clues, you're not getting the chemical reactions you get from seeing a friend. With a lot of
I think the opposite also is true, that you could actually have the rehumanizing through the use of technology.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. I think that's your opportunity. I think that is the biggest product that hasn't yet been put out there. And I think that by putting that fun in, by putting that engagement back in and getting people to get... Fun is the thing that everybody loves to share.
Yeah.
I loved that video of the traffic light that you shared, where, you know, people can go and be the person dancing on the traffic light, but the people at the traffic light start pointing up and sharing the experience with strangers and dancing along.
Exactly.
And building that kind of bond. Fun does that. Fun is the thing that will make you turn around to the guy that normally you'd be far too shy and insular to wow, look at that, and both of you, delighted, suddenly have that conversation.
I've learned that is a great way to start conversations in an elevator, just to point out something or make some ridiculous comment and just see if they're willing to laugh or smile.
Yes, yes, and you know, again, I think this is something that your product offers that people are just about on the brink of discovering they need, and that is going to become a huge hit. I would take a slight gamble on that. I would have a section of your site, or look through your domain names. Is there one that kind of leans on that, and build that up, become the thought leader in that space?
In terms of injecting fun into
rehumanizing.
Rehumanizing. Actually, no, Don't anybody register that right now.
Do you need a minute?
Excuse me, one moment. I've got my registrar. Excuse me.
Yeah. But, you know, I think that is going to be a big product, and I think it's something that you can own. It's not guaranteed that it'll come about. You know, there could be something that takes people a different direction, but I think it's a good gamble to take. I think you've got at least a 60% chance of that paying off, and when it does, you own that space. You are the Google of that area. You are the top company in that space.
Yeah, I think the branding is very interesting because originally I was dubbed by one of my gamification consultants as Dr. Gamification, but that became Dr. G, and that was really confusing with Dr. V. And so that didn't work. Then I changed the name to Driven Engagement, but then people had many questions as to who's driving what. And Driven Engagement sounded to people to be too hostile. And in the end, I just settled on Epic Win. I wanted Epic Win, but Epic Win had already been taken in the URLs, and so I went for Epic Win Systems. But the logo still is Epic Win, and someday, when I'm rich and famous, we get to buy that epicwin.com.
So. You've just added 2 figures to the price. You never say outright that you're looking at buying a domain.
It's okay. I think they're never going to sell. So.
They're probably not, but now if they do, somebody else is going to be competing with you to buy it because they know that you really, really want it.
The truth of the matter is I can change the name today to something different if I needed to. I mean, I have a stable of domains that have at least 5 brandable names across everything from the .com to the .org. So I'm not terribly worried about that. It just would be a little bit of a setback in terms of what I've built thus far. But it's the same story. When this company becomes successful, when it is sold, I'll need to do something else. And so the next big project will come into focus. So, you know, the so-called serial entrepreneur is the one who moves from one project to the next and never really retires.
We did have one suggestion here that captology is cats as purring technology.
Purring technology, yes. We never forget Snowshoe. He reminds me every day.
And you have the claw scars to prove it.
I have so many scars, yes.
But I do certainly think that, you know, this kind of area, and Manny's agreeing with us here, is a really important part of the big picture, the big conversation that's going on in so many corporations right now. The idea that, you know, it's very hard to keep staff comfortable.
Right.
And we do know that, you know, companies like Google, companies across the globe are starting to worry more and more about keeping their staff comfortable because A, it makes them more productive, B, it's less time off sick, and C, when you've invested in staff and more, as more and more products get intelligence driven, they're more about creativity, they're more about owning patents and intellectual property, you want to keep those intellects around.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it's interesting because in the HR space, gamification is particularly done, well, it's done primarily for 2 reasons. One is to have the metrics in terms of performance of employees, but secondarily, to keep them loyal so that they do stick around. There's so much churn that goes on nowadays in corporate America that's very disruptive.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I know you've offered to pay me much more and give me a better job, but I'm top of the leaderboard here. I can't go now.
Exactly. I can't leave. I'll lose my status.
So certainly, you know, the kind of content you're going to be building, and you really do need to be starting to put these strategies into place now so that this stream is starting up before this year is out. Certainly, you know, the educational stuff, I've just heard about gamification. What is it? What is persuasive technology? What is, you know, and those kind of questions, so the knowledge and answer, that's anything. I mean, 80% of searches on Google in any time frame, doesn't matter what time frame you take, so on a day or on a month or whatever, 80% of search is pure informational. It's people wanting to know what is. 10% is transactional, and by transactional, it's every kind of transaction from downloads to uploads. So, you know,
Well, that's
where
why
they can
that's
subscribe.
but in terms of the people who are just looking for information as opposed to those who are buyers, isn't it important to sort those? Because, for example, I was looking at creating a $7 tripwire, if you will. It has a gamification card deck with a series of videos, and if somebody is willing to give $7, which is probably less than the price of the typical softcover or hardcover book, that can then lead into a qualified mailing list of buyers.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly it can. I'd half think about coming up with some of your own books.
I have a manuscript already, which is interesting, and I have someone who's helping me flesh out a very deep dive into all of the research and whatever is current within influence and behavioral guidance and neuromarketing. That is actually due in about 3 weeks, so that will be a very hefty tome that can be even attached to the back of the manuscript as a reference.
Yeah. Do you remember those role-playing game books where you'd kind of go through? Here in the UK, Steve Jackson, I think, was one of the major writers. But you know, you've got an adventure story, and then you get to a point: are you going to do this or this? And if it's this, go to this page, and if it's that, go to this page. And then you skip through, and so you've got a customized story according to the choices you made. I think you could do a kind of glorified white paper on services that you offer in gamification, in persuasion, in entertainment, that kind of thing, where you offer them choices, what kind of feature they would add to something, and then what the outcome of that might be, and then how they carry on with that, and basically give them an adventure story that over time, because they're going to play it more than once.
No, and that sounds like something that Manny would resonate with too, because I'm thinking about him with respect to creating adventures.
Yeah, but this is it. It's putting it into a narrative, but it's also showing, in a way, it's giving a sense of experience to choices that they make and showing how it could pan out without them taking any risks at all. And it's a great way sometimes of making somebody feel like they've been through all of the options and eventually arrived at the right decision, which is, of course...
Well, the white paper actually is going to be gamified. They will be earning points and other things like that by doing a series of tasks contained within the white paper. So it's to give them at least a small taste of what it's like to be in a gamified environment.
Yeah. Well, I've got to say, that is the quickest hour for me that I've had yet, because I love this topic and I could probably carry on all night, and I know you could. But yeah, thanks Lee. Lee gave me a quick kick under the table to let me know it was time.
Just did my job.
That's a long leg.
Well, it took me 2 kicks because I thought he was just playing footsie the first time.
Okay.
That was in there.
So, Chris, what thoughts would you like to leave us with this week? And we'll, of course, see you back next week.
I would just say that this has been very insightful. I've really enjoyed sharing some of these ideas. I've actually been far more transparent in my game plan for this business than at any other time in public. And it's just been a good experience. I'm looking forward to next week and seeing if we can... I'm also looking forward to getting into the comment stream and answering some of those questions or comments.
Yeah, we've had some great comments coming through. Lee,
cool.
What are you up to this week?
Well, I'm up to this week. Getting back to work. I had a couple of days, not off, but away last week, so I've got a lot to catch up on. Got a lovely hangout coming on Tuesday night next week. It's a bit of a manic one, but it's a good one. Christopher, if you want me to clarify any of the points that I've brought up, or anybody else, I suppose, just give us a shout. You can see me up there, wherever it is, on G+ / Lee Rick, like that. Yeah, that way, yeah. And that's it for me. I'm just having a nice chilled Sunday night.
Excellent. Well, I'm as ever on Susie Chat on Tuesday. We've got a good one coming up there. You can catch me next week on the follow-up show, which I'm asking that you please join me 4. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget the little thumbs up icon on the YouTube video. Helps me out, helps more people see the video in future, and gets us even more people to come on the show and be ammonized, and more people watching. So help me out that way. And see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Epic win.